Hello and welcome to the PhD Life Raft podcast. I'm Emma Brzezinski and today I'm talking to Professor Lynette Goddard. We begin by talking about Lynette's own experience of doing a PhD, and then we go on to touch on other areas such as intersectionality, on finding mentors, and about identifying the legacy of your PhD project. So I hope you enjoy. Hello, Lynette.
Hi, Emma. Thanks for having me.
You are so welcome. I just always I'm confessing that we do know each other. And actually we did our PhDs together. Mm-hmm. So, and we've had lots of conversations about race, and well, lots of other things too. But I think because I've witnessed you negotiating this arena and kind of coming into the academy and all of that, you know, us developing careers and coming through. And you have always negotiated it with such grace and such kind of thoughtful reflection. That is why I wanted to talk to you about this and let other people benefit from that wisdom too. So thank you so much for saying yes. And I always start with these interviews with asking people to talk about their own experience of their PhDs. So how was that for you?
Gosh, so my PhD, I finished my PhD in 2004. So I should just say that. So I studied it part-time, started it in 1997 and finished it in 2004. So I did it within 6 years. And I was working, well, you know this,
yep.
I was working part-time at the same time. So sort of half the year I got to spend on my PhD, and then the other half of the year I would be sort of teaching and doing regular academic life stuff. And then for the second half of the PhD, I'd actually got a full-time job. So that meant that I only was able to focus on my writing in the holidays. So I sometimes say to people that I wrote my PhD in the Easter, Christmas and summer holidays, and in a way it kind of felt like that. But I think it's been a pattern that has helped me going forward in terms of how I separate the kind of teaching term period of the academic year from the kind of research, the points at which I'm more able to focus on my research.
It's really interesting, isn't it? Because I think a lot of people struggle on that part-time route, but actually, like you say, it can be a really useful training ground in terms of that's where you get to do your work.
Yeah, well, it's given me a structure, I think, that I've pretty much stuck to since then, and I've been able to then write 2 normal size books, you know, PhD length books. Well, one was my PhD actually, and a shorter book, so like a 25,000 word book, using that kind of model of, you know, carving out the time in the periods when I have the time. So rather than worrying about what I'm not able to do in the times when I have to focus on teaching preparation and being in the classroom, I just know in my mind, okay, no worries, when it comes to the breaks, that's when the balance of your focus will kind of shift towards your research. So yeah,
I think you're being characteristically humble in that you have published so much and you have spoken in so many areas and you have this great body of work behind you, which is amazing and I'm in awe of. And the work, one of the projects particularly I was going to ask you about today that you were just involved in was this Phenomenal Women project, which the full title was Phenomenal Women, Portraits of UK Black Female Professors. So tell us a little bit about that.
Okay, so the first thing I should probably say about that is that was a project that I was part of because I'm one of only 27, I think it is at the moment, Black women, women with an X, professors in the UK. So it was a project that was an exhibition of photos that was curated by Nicola Rollock and Bill Knight in order to kind of celebrate Black women professors. So it'd come out, Nicola Rollock had done a report, maybe 2017, some while ago anyway, where she'd found out that there were only 25 at that time Black women professors in the UK. So this is out of something like 20,000 professors in the UK. So it's 0.00 whatever percentage of professors in the UK are Black women. And she'd had this idea that she would celebrate the 25. It became about 45, I think, in the end, because they included people that were emeritus professors or had been professors and had left. So they included a kind of wider range than the kind of 27 current professors. And they wanted to celebrate that with a photo exhibition. So Bill Knight took on this task. It was sort of last October, so I'd only just become a professor at that point. And I got this invite to be part of this exhibition. And it was just an exhibition to kind of show the breadth, so the different areas in which Black women are professors, and also just to show us in a kind of, so not kind of delivering a lecture or anything, but just in whatever environment we wanted to be in. So I remember I actually had my photos taken at Bill Knight's house because he lives not far from me.
I was going to say, where is that gorgeous chair? Because you're in the most beautiful chair.
Well, I say this, but then I look at the carpet and I think, no, the rug or whatever it is. And I'm like, no, that's just not my rug. I just wouldn't do it like that. But the other
nice chair, though.
Was to come to, he could have come to Royal Holloway, but we couldn't sort of. There were two of the Black women professors, I should say, are at Royal Holloway.
Yes,
so there's myself and Gloria in the Department of Management, who's also one of these 27.
Yeah.
And so, but the day that he was coming to Royal Holloway, I wasn't available. So I went to his house and I took my sort of stack of books. So when you see the photo of me, there's a kind of stack of my books, Doreen Lawrence books and bell hooks. I think I took a couple of my own books. And then I was reading a book called Impact of Race and Theatre. So yeah, it's a great exhibition.
It's really beautiful.
It launched in March or something, so it was just before lockdown, and so it never got to do the next place. I think it was going to go to the South Bank Centre next, but I have just heard, literally last week, I heard that the exhibition is about to go to the South Bank, and it will be a sort of external, they're going to do sort of external, they're going to show it outside the Queen Elizabeth Hall.
Amazing.
So they're creating a kind of installation of these, I guess, I don't know in what form they're going to be, but they're going to be outside so more people will be able to just walk by and see them.
Yes, because they're beautiful images in their own right, aren't they? But I think the power of the message behind them too is...
yeah. I like them because they're black and white, and I sort of like sort of black and white for Black women professors thing. And I think, lots of Black women with, our own natural hair, etc. I should say, though, as well, that I identify as non-binary.
Right.
So when I was invited to be part of this exhibition and to kind of count as a Black woman, I thought about it for a while, and then I thought, no, actually, in terms of keeping up the numbers of the Black women professors, to make 26 become 27, then I'm a Black woman in that respect. So I'm read as a Black woman. I'm seen as a Black woman by many people. I suppose my career path took me 20 years to get to professor.
Yes.
It's quite a long time, I think.
Yes.
And some of that may have been to do with race and race and intersectionality, I suppose. So although I would say I'm a non-binary person, I do identify as a Black woman when it comes to added into that count. I suppose if we're going to say how many Black non-binary professors there are, there'd probably be even fewer.
Well, and I think that issue of intersectionality, say it right, is becoming more and more important.
Yeah.
So I wonder how, because obviously in that moment it was really significant. How does that play out in other areas within the academy?
Yeah. Well, funny enough, so my work has always been about intersectionality,
Right.
but I think I didn't call it that. I used to say I'm looking at race, gender, and sexuality, but that's kind of, I'm looking at race and sexuality. So I now say I'm looking at race and intersectionality. I suppose in terms of the academy, so one of the things, for example, is that in drama, in the discipline that I'm in, which is drama and theatre, there were very few. Well, for a long time, I was the only Black, let's say woman, the only Black woman to have a full-time post at a drama department in the UK. And for a long time, there was me. And then for a little while, there were maybe 3 or 4 of us. So I think if you're looking for Black women, you might find more in other disciplines, let's say maybe sociological disciplines, for example. But I do think that we are, I don't want to use the word excluded, but we are super marginalised in certain areas of the academy, let's say. And then there's the whole thing as well around kind of senior leadership and the lack of Black people, first of all, and particularly Black women within kind of senior leadership roles. I mean, when you keep coming back to that, there were 26 Black professors out of 20,000, you know. So if there were 26 out of 260, that's one thing. If there were 26 out of 2,600, that's another thing. It's another 26 out of 20,000. Wow.
And I think that issue, as we know, of kind of role models and mentors, and that is so important. And you mentioned some of the reading that you've done. And so I just wondered where you found mentorship, where you have found role models.
Gosh, I think I took a lot of my... Well, one mentor was not a Black woman, actually. Right. But I would say it would have been Jackie Bratton, of course, who, as a woman, as an LGBTQ person, I think it was really, really important in terms of encouraging me to find my own voice and articulate my own voice. But then aside from that, I guess it is the kind of the work of scholars like Heidi Merzer, for example, who did the work on Black British feminisms, which I found really, really helpful. And again, it's that thing of Black women talking in our own voices, I suppose. But more than that, it's the work from African-American scholars, really. I think, at the beginning of my PhD, I was reading bell hooks, Audre Lourde. And that was where I kind of started my PhD work. So that was 1997. Even before that, actually, when I decided to do a PhD, I was reading bell hooks and Audre Lourde. So that's 1994. And I'm still going back continually to the work of bell hooks, Audre Lourde, Patricia Hill Collins, Angela Davis. So the African-American feminist writers who really articulate this idea that as Black scholars, we need to try and connect our life experiences with our analysis of the work that we analyse. Now, I don't know that I've always managed to do that in quite the way that they do. And I think that is where the kind of question of voice as a Black woman within a white academy comes into play, because sometimes I do feel like I've hidden my voice, because I'm maybe in a setting where I'm not sure that room is ready to hear my experiences in full. So people like bell hooks and Audre Lourde, they were quite clear about what they were doing, who they were doing it for. They were doing it for Black women, and they were out there to empower Black women. But as a kind of minority, I'm often, like many of the conferences I go to, I'm often the only Black person there. And so being at a conference and looking out at a sea of white faces and then trying to find the confidence to speak a la Audre Lourde is still really challenging for me to think about how to incorporate sort of the personal with the kind of political and analytical.
Well, I have seen you speak beautifully, eloquently, confidently, just amazing work that you do. But I am thinking of someone who's listening to this as a PhD student and starting off. So kind of just to sit with that uncomfortable moment, I guess, for a bit longer, and I think also to acknowledge that because you appear eloquent and confident, that doesn't mean that is always what's going on for you. I think you do that work because of and despite of how you feel in that moment, and that is what I think is amazing.
What I would say, sorry to interrupt, but I would say that so even if with all of the maybe discomfort or the feeling that I'm losing my voice or have lost my voice and search for my voice, I think I do come with quite a strong sense of why I'm doing the work that I'm doing. Yeah. And so I think that's the thing I would always advise people to hold on to, like why you're doing the work that you're doing and why you're doing the work that you're doing will be unique. So for example, you and I could have the same set of, people call it raw data, don't they? The same set of plays, the same set of reviews from the plays, the same set of historical information about the plays, but we can tell a different story about those plays or about that play, and that's because of who we are uniquely. And so I do hold on to that idea that I'm the only person that can tell the story of Black theatre, for example, in the way that I tell it, and that someone else to the side might tell it in a different way. So I've been doing a lot of work on Black Lives Matter for quite a while. It's kind of interesting. It's really prominent this year. But I've been doing work on plays that deal with Black men in the police for about 4 or 5 years now. And I can talk about those plays in a way based on my memory, based on things that I remember from, say, the 80s and the 90s. So I can talk about them in a way that's different to someone who's kind of coming at that research fresh. So I think that's the thing to hold on to. What is it that you're bringing that does come from personal experience? So that is like Audre Lourde, and that even if you can't always articulate that, you can articulate it somehow in the way that you analyse the work.
That is really helpful in terms of, and that's stepping into that PhD process as well, isn't it? That sense of kind of your why, I think.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Are you doing it?
What's the thing that's going to make you, I say this to PhD students all the time, I say in that moment when you get to the middle of the PhD and you've got all your material and you can't get any piece of writing finished and you're just feeling really, really stuck, you have to have the subject that it's going to make you wake up every day and still do that. Do you know what I mean? So wake up every day and still try to write the thing, still try to read the next piece of research or whatever it might be. And I think that's to do with your why. So for me, it was like, Black British theatre is not being documented, or rarely being documented, hardly being documented, and someone needs to document it. And that's my why.
I love it. And that sense of kind of collecting mentors and finding spaces that support you. I don't know if you have any advice on finding those spaces. That's a tough question, isn't it, to answer?
Gosh. It's funny because I think now there might be more spaces, particularly for Black scholars and people of colour scholars, because I think there is more critical mass, even in kind of literature and theatre and performance studies, where generally those communities haven't been very large. I think there is more of a critical mass there. And I suppose, I don't know really, within the academy, I don't know, to be honest. I guess the thing would be to find the spaces as well outside of the academy.
Yes.
So I think for me, while I was doing my PhD, a lot of my kind of connections were to people that were outside of the academy but were Black people. But at that time, it's time, in the 90s, people were talking about race much more. And, my friends still do talk about race much more maybe than your average person, if you like. So although they weren't in my discipline, or they were still able to kind of have those conversations with me, I think.
Absolutely.
I think that might be the thing, might be to not to kind of just think about people that are within your discipline. Maybe that's the advice, particularly if you're in a discipline like theatre studies where black and brown people are really underrepresented, but maybe it's about looking for communities of people outside of your discipline or in other disciplines or in related disciplines,
Yeah.
In disciplines that might help to feed the work that you're doing. I know when I was a PhD student, I really wanted to know more about how you might use sociological analysis to understand Black theatre. So a lot of my connections were actually people that were in sociological and cultural studies disciplines rather than in theatre studies disciplines. So it might be that.
Yeah, and finding community, isn't it? Finding people that you can, and I think also kind of going to an interdisciplinary place can be really useful because it helps you to reflect back on your own discipline.
Yeah.
So there will be things that you share, but there's also be that in particular, and again that comes back to your why, isn't it? That's what I'm doing in my discipline. That's what I bring back to my work. Is that?
Yeah.
It's really, really helpful. So I always conclude here with asking people impossible questions. So here's your impossible question. In terms of a top tip, so, I mean, of course, this is ridiculous. It's like with any sort of higher education study, you go kind of postmodernism, 20 minutes, go. We now go race and academy, 20 minutes, done, which of course we haven't. It's the beginning of a discussion. But I think in terms of, and there's been so much gorgeous advice you've given here, and but if you were kind of going back to yourself, starting off on your PhD, what advice would you give?
So is that do you mean advice particular to being a Black person navigating the academy, or do you just mean advice generally?
Well, that is an interesting question, actually, isn't it? Yeah. Do you think that there will be something particular that you want to say about race in the academy, or do you think it's that there's more kind of fundamental issues?
So I think in terms of race in the academy, I think in some ways we've already discussed that. So for me, a lot of my work has been about my why, and also about the legacy that I want to leave. So I guess it would be about figuring out what is the legacy that you want to leave for the Black scholars coming up behind you. But for me, more than that, in some ways, for young Black people. So a lot of the work that I do is I do this work because I don't want another generation of young Black people to come up and say that no one's documented our theatre history, right? So that does kind of, in a way, come back to the why. I guess my big tip, and it's the one, again, that's managed to write the publications that I have, is the bird by bird tip. Yes. So this actually comes from Anne Lamott's book, Bird by Bird, which I haven't even read the whole book, right? But I read the beginning of the book, and I read the kind of anecdote, and the anecdote is about a young child who maybe 10, so we think it was her brother or something, who had to do a project on birds. He had the whole summer to do the project. The project's now due tomorrow, and he's sitting at the kitchen table with an empty big sheet of paper and no birds. And he's kind of getting stressed because obviously it's quite last minute at that point. And he's saying to his parents, I can't remember if it's mum or dad, help me, I need your help, please help me, I just need to do some birds. And the parent kind of says, well, you just need to do it. It's your task. You need to do it bird by bird. And that And then she kind of uses that anecdote as a place from which to kind of springboard off and talk about an attitude to creative writing. And she gives a couple of tips. One, just allocate the time for it and allow the creativity to happen. And I absolutely love that. So it's like, have yourself a good, so for me, it was, I know that I can write in the Easter holidays. And so in the Easter holidays, I'm going to sit at my desk from 10 to 12 and 2 till 4, or some people write in the middle of the night. Then whatever your time is, you set that time aside and that you allow the creativity to happen. And you trust that the creativity will happen. So you trust that, you know, you'll draw your first bird, and then you'll draw your next bird. And then before long, however long that takes, you'll have your page will be kind of full. And I just love that bird by bird metaphor. The other thing that came out of that was also, don't judge the work. So don't judge it, just do it. I think in some PhD books, it's like, don't get it right, get it written.
Yes.
So it's don't judge what you're doing, just do it, get it out, you know. And I think that that's also a really helpful tip. And I think that's probably a really helpful tip for Black writers as well. Because one of the things that happened to me in my PhD process is that I was very, very aware of the examiners. And I was very aware that the examiners were not likely to be Black people. And I think being too aware of that, I got blocked. It was like, I can't write a thing because I'm trying to write, again, it's about voice, right? I'm trying to write in the voice and the language that I think that they will understand, you know. But actually, you sit there, you give the time, you write in your own voice, and you don't judge it. Is really, really, they're my sort of top tips, I think. But bird by bird is really, really important, because it means that you have, if it's 10 minutes a day or 5 minutes a day, you know, or 2 hours a day, whatever it is, you set that time aside and you give your energy to the project at that time. And some days you won't write anything. Some days you'll just sit there and look at the empty screen or the empty page. But that's okay. You just come back the next day or the next time that you have set aside and you do it again. And eventually stuff does get written. I find it sort of like magic almost.
Yeah.
Really, as a way of writing, because it's like, oh my God, yeah, if you just sit there and you just keep beavering away at it, you will get the publication done.
I love it. Yeah. Thank you so much for that. And there's lots of brilliant references that you have mentioned through this, and that will all be in the show notes so people can access that.
Great.
Thank you so much, Lynette, for your time. I
enjoyed that.
And be well.
Yep, and you stay safe.
Thank you.